Hello, welcome to the conversation here on News Central Television. This is the show where we bring you all the latest political happenings on the continent. I'm Gbenga Aborowa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. Today on the program, we will be marking Workers' Day. It is celebrated annually and globally on May 1st for the role, contribution and sacrifice of workers for the society. And we use this opportunity to wish all workers all over the world, and especially the African continent, a happy Workers' Day. Now let's start a conversation in Kenya, where President Uhuru Kenyatta has announced an immediate increase in the country's minimum wage by 12% to help workers cope with a surge in consumer prices, driven in part by the war in Ukraine. Speaking at Labour Day celebrations in the capital Nairobi, the president says it's necessary because the minimum wage had not been reviewed in 3 years and the cost of living has increased. Kenya's current minimum wage is 13,500 Kenyan shillings, that is $116.68 per month.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa abandoned his Workers' Day speech in the northwestern city of Rustenburg on Sunday when striking mine workers stormed the stage. Protesters held up signs while chanting "Cyril must go" and demanding a wage increase during the ceremony at a stadium near the northwestern city of Rustenburg. They are demanding an annual salary pay rise of 1,000 rand. President Ramaphosa tried to address the miners' concerns but was met by booing. South Africa's economy has been hit hard by the COVID crisis and unemployment is now around 35%. Now, joining us to discuss this, we have a Kenyan, Demas Kipromno. He is a policy analyst and human rights lawyer joining in from Wales in the United Kingdom. And from Cape Town, South Africa, we have Matthew Parks, the Parliamentary Coordinator for the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
I'd like to start with Demas. What's the reaction of Kenyans to the announcement by President Uhuru Kenyatta of a 12% increase in the minimum wage?
The initial reaction was a celebration, although some quarters have noted that the cost of living has gone up by about 38% in some sectors. So the 12% is not that impactful, but in reality, this is a win for workers because it helps cushion Kenyans from the prolific inflation that has been going on for the past 4 years. So in Kenya, the inflation has been on a steady rise even before COVID and before the Ukraine crisis. And so as much as many would say that the 12% is not enough, it is a step towards the right direction in terms of helping Kenyans cushion from the detrimental effects of the global rise in prices, for example.
All right, a step towards the right direction, you say. Now, over to you, Matthew. In South Africa, while we're talking about the celebration of Workers' Day, we had reports of quite an uproar, especially as President Cyril Ramaphosa gave his speech. Now, what are the grievances of the Sibanye-Stillwater mine workers in South Africa?
Yes, no, look, May Day is about workers expressing their concerns, their frustration with the many challenges they face. So workers are correct on May Day, and as they always do across the world, and in South Africa, they express their anger on the very difficult conditions they face. So at the rally yesterday, workers from the Sibanye gold mine expressed their anger. They've been on strike for 3 months. They've been simply demanding a 1,000 rand increase per month. That's about $65 a month increase. At the same time, the management has refused to give that. At the same time, workers have seen that billions of rands have been paid out to the shareholders of this company, and the CEO of this company himself received a salary of 300 million rand last year. Workers are angry that they had asked government to intervene in this crisis. Government has not responded. But also the other issue that workers are angry about. Public servants did not receive their increase in 2020 despite a wage agreement that they had signed with government. Many municipal workers have not received their salaries for quite a few time. Many workers who worked for state-owned companies were retrenched, didn't receive their salaries for 18 months. And of course, we have a broader economic crisis where 46% of workers are unemployed, 75% of young people have no job. 2.2 million jobs were lost over the past 2 years. And millions of workers have lost their wages. And at the same time, workers see that rampant corruption is really crippling the state and is denying workers the salaries, the jobs they need, and also the public service they depend upon. So there's a combination of frustration and anger. And yesterday was simply about workers expressing that anger to the president and making sure that he and government here, and they do something about it before it's simply too late.
Thank you, Matthew. Now, Demas, the 12% hike in the minimum wage by President Uhuru Kenyatta falls short of the 24% that had been sought by the Central Organization of Trade Unions. You did allude to the fact that, you know, it's a step in the right direction, but how much can the 12% increase in the minimum wage help to mitigate inflationary pressures, which rose to 6.47% year-on-year last month from 5.56% in March, according to the Statistics Office in Kenya?
Well, to be honest...
is it a drop in the ocean, or how much effect can it really have?
Many people will consider it a drop in the ocean. First of all, because there are very many people who, even with government intervention in terms of minimum wage, that they are outside the reach of these brackets. For example, people who work in the informal sector, artisans, domestic workers, for example. These are people who are outside the formal economy, and they will find it difficult in any case to enforce this rise because, for example, the country has a very high rate of unemployment, and so that any form of employment, no matter how low it is compared to the minimum wage, is seen as a plus. So there's that facet of it, that there are many people who find themselves outside government intervention in terms of raising of minimum wage. But for the people who work in the formal sector, the people whose wages will go up, they will struggle because in any case, it falls far below the expectations in terms of the inflationary pressures that have been feeling for the last 2 to 3 years. That coupled with the bleak economic realities that are going on in Kenya right now, whereby 60% of our revenues go into servicing debts outside Kenya, for example. It really does not inspire much, but it is still a step in the right direction. The Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, was insisting on 24% increase because that would perhaps really mitigate what the Kenyans are feeling on the ground. However, with the continued inflationary pressures, and especially coupled with what has been going on, the fuel shortages, what we expect from the prices of bread, for example, after Ukraine failed to plant because of the war. Many analysts see that the future is bleak, but we celebrated 12%. Yeah.
Okay, Demas, I'll stick with you now. You talk about the fuel shortages, you talk about inflation, and of course the effect of the Ukraine and Russia war. But let's look at the private sector now, because it's one thing to talk about an increase, and there's another thing for the private sector to comply. So how much do you think that the private sector will actually comply with this 12% increase in Kenya? And how much collaboration is there between the Kenyan government and the organized private sector?
Well, strictly speaking, the private sector must comply because this is the law. However, will the economic realities, for example, an economy in recession, allow companies to dig even deeper in order to support staff when every other thing, from the price of fuel, all other factors of production have gone up? That is the big question. And how far will the other actors, including the private sector, especially those who deal with people in the informal economy, how far will they go to ensure that members of the public, members of the labor force get the 12% increase as dictated by the government. I think it's going to be very difficult. It is an extra pressure on a situation that is already bleak, and others might argue that it distorts the market, the market in terms of imposing too much government regulation on the factors of production, for example, labor. But this will see as we move forward. But the sectors that can and the sectors that will have really helped the members of the public, because the economic realities are quite bleak and they don't look like they would be improving anytime soon, because of the global recession, because of what's going on in Ukraine, because of the pandemic. There's so much going on at the same time that is really discouraging.
Thank you very much, Demas. I'd like to bring in Matthew. Matthew, the workers are asking for a 1,000 rand increase every year. And looking at the current global economic realities, that is almost an impossible task for the South African government to fulfill, looking at the impact of COVID and the current Russia-Ukraine war, and also the flooding that has happened in KwaZulu-Natal. In what ways would COSATU try to find a middle way and understanding? What solution would you suggest so that the workers and the governments can make some progress?
Well, it's a private company, so it's not government paying for it. Sibanye is a privately owned listed company. We think they can afford it. The mining industry has had a boom over the past few years. It's been a significant commodities boom. These are workers who produce the wealth of that company. But at the same time, this company, which is now squabbling over a few hundred rands per worker, because they made a revised offer of 850 rand, so it's 150 rand difference, which is essentially about $6 a month difference that the employer is still refusing to compromise on. This very same company paid its shareholders billions of rands in dividend shares, and at the same time they paid the CEO 300 million rand a year. So we think there is space. We cannot afford to be the most unequal society in the world. We cannot afford to have 80% of society living in poverty and 10% of society living in extreme wealth. There has to be some give and take. Otherwise, it is simply a ticking time bomb. And a company should not be surprised when workers go on strike when they've reached the frustration. We've seen not only in this mining company, we've seen in the retail sector, many other companies where the CEOs will make 100 million, 200-300 million rand a year. And they'll pay the staff so little money that they don't even qualify to pay income tax. They barely afford to buy homes for the family, to feed their children, to pay for transport for their kids to get to school. At the same time, we've seen workers' salaries really being squeezed because of the Ukraine war, where the international oil price is increasing. So the fuel price in the non-producing, non-oil countries like South Africa goes up. And of course, that means the price of food, the price of transport, the price of electricity, everything else also goes up as well, further squeezing workers. So workers are really reaching the end of their patience. They expect companies to do better. They expect also government to do better. What the company also cannot afford is for workers to go on strike. This is 3 months now workers have gone on strike, a huge sacrifice to themselves. We think companies would be much better off if they simply engage with workers, did so quickly, and find ways to resolve and to find a wage settlement agreement. But also we've seen many workers lose patience because companies have signed agreements with workers, and then only later, a month later, a few months later, they simply walk away from those wage agreements. So companies need to do much better to build a sense of trust with the trade unions and with workers as well.
Okay, Matthew, I'll stick with you now because we're looking at the issues of workers' welfare, and you said that the strike has been for over 3 months. Now, looking at the public sector now, what do you think is responsible for the low economic growth in South Africa? Do you see President Cyril Ramaphosa not fulfilling the duties of helping the economy of South Africa?
So look, those challenges facing South Africa's economy are not overnight. They've been building up, especially for the past decade. The number one issue is the issue of unreliable and unaffordable electricity. We've had a huge problem with electricity load shedding for the past decade, simply because we failed to invest in new energy generation over the last 15 years. So our power stations, our power grid is really aging. And of course, we have frequent load shedding, so that disrupts all companies across all sectors of the economy. We have the issue of a passenger and our freight rail on the verge of collapse because of significant amounts of criminal syndicates stealing cables, preventing these trains from working. So in the chance that our public freight or rail company can't work, it means our mining or agriculture or manufacturing exports can't get to the markets on time. When our commuter railway network doesn't work, it means workers can't get in the cities to the companies or to the workplace on time, so that disrupts productivity. But of course, we've seen a decade of real industrial scale corruption in the state, where politicians and management and people in the private sector have literally stolen billions, hundreds of billions of rands from government. This has denied badly needed money to go into the economy, to go into public services. It really has brought public services in many areas to the point of collapse. And as a consequence, we also see many municipalities failing, for example, to maintain roads, to provide electricity, provide water or sanitation. This has caused many companies to close. So there's a combination of issues. We need to address them. The president has tried to move on corruption, on electricity and so forth, but a president can't do everything. His ministers must deliver or they must be removed. The provincial premiers, the mayors, the CEOs of government departments, of companies must either deliver or they must be removed. South Africa is the most industrialized economy in the continent. We have a very diversified economy, manufacturing sector, but it really is fragmenting and it really requires urgent leadership from the president to ministers to the private sector, but it requires government to move with speed. And these workers are simply frustrated that government does a lot of talking, a lot of promises, and very little action.
Thank you, Matthew. Now, Demas, President Uhuru Kenyatta, in his Labor Day speech, said the high cost of living was due to factors beyond my control, like the coronavirus pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He also castigated his deputy president and political leaders, including Deputy President William Ruto, for seeking to blame the government for the economic woes. My question to you, Demas, are his excuses valid, or do you think the Kenyan government could have done a better job at managing the economy? Or is he just scapegoating, is he using the Ukraine crisis as an excuse and scapegoating his deputy president?
Well, if you look at the graph of, for example, inflation and the numbers on employment or unemployment, you'd see a trend that began far earlier than the Ukraine crisis or coronavirus. The pandemic and the Ukraine crisis only came in to exacerbate the situation.
So he's had, give or take, about 7 years of his presidency without any external issues.
Yes, yeah, without any external issues. And for example, the issue of runaway corruption, the issue on debt, uncontrolled debt and debt management has been going on even before the coronavirus or the Ukraine crisis. So to be honest, certain government issues, certain government actions are responsible for certain downward trends that we see in terms of economic growth. This is a regime that inherited a very healthy economy, and it has been plagued by a lot of political infighting, a lot of corruption, and issues of disobedience of court orders and such. And so it is true that coronavirus has come in to make a bad situation worse. The Ukraine crisis has, for example, seen the rise of prices of certain commodities. But even before this, the upward trend in terms of inflation, the upward trend in terms of unemployment was already at play. And so I think this being an election year and him being a politician, the president was politicking. But to be...
So talking about the politicking, I want to take you up on this. I know you're not in the mind of President Uhuru Kenyatta, but what could you say affected his What would you say is behind his reasoning of saying that his deputy president, which belongs to the same government as him, is responsible for some of the economic crisis?
So what happened from 2018 is that the president and the deputy president, who under our constitution are tied at the hip, unless one resigns, they must stick together because they were elected under one ticket. In 2018, they had a disagreement that was triggered by the president's decision to embrace the lead of official opposition and seek to change certain laws and policies in the constitution in what they termed as building bridges for a better Kenya.
The handshake and the BBI.
The handshake and so on and so forth. And since then, the government has been split and they've not been pulling in the same direction. It is the president and the deputy president to blame for this, and not any other person, not any other Kenyan. And this is a situation that they created, and they should not blame anyone for it. And I'm not in the president's mind, for example, when he blames the deputy president, but I would imagine that they, being the people we elected, have the responsibility to deliver to Kenyans what they promised. And so far, that mission has been thwarted, for example, because the economic prospects of Kenya are not quite promising. And these other factors only come in to make the situation much, much worse.
Okay, over to you now, Matthew. Let's do with situations in South Africa. While we're still looking at the blame game between the president of Kenya and his deputy, William Ruto. So now, Matthew, we know that according to reports, now the economic freedom fighters led by Julius Malema has made a supposed report that he will soon be creating his own union. Now, what are your thoughts on this? Because according to Julius Malema, he is saying that all the union workers are more to the side of the employers and not looking at the well-being of the employees. What are your thoughts on this?
No, look, I mean, Malema's engaging in populist gimmicks. He's looking to build support for his political party, and that's his right. We live in a democracy. Everybody's got the right to form a party, to seek to mobilize support for it, even if we disagree with him. Malema himself is not an angel. I mean, when he was in the ANC, he left a litany of scandals behind him, including issues of serious allegations of corruption and so forth. His politics has not been a helpful politics. But look, it's his right. In a democracy, everybody's got the right to contest, and people have the right to form any trade union they want to do so. As a trade union federation, we are concerned about a fragmentation of organized labor. We have over 200 trade unions in this country. Some of them are so small, 200, 500, 300, too small to be viable or to pose any threat to the employer to be able to negotiate with any sense of strength or coherence. Our position as COSATU is to encourage unions to come together, to unite, to have one federation for the entire country, to have one union for each industry, not to fragment in a proliferation of trade unions. We do work quite closely with other trade union federations and unions, because at the end of the day, the objective challenges facing workers are the same, irrespective of which union you belong to, which political party you support. Yes, COSATU has historically always been in alliance with the liberation movement, the ANC, going back to the days of apartheid. And there's been many victories for workers as a consequence. The fact we had a democratic breakthrough in 1994 was because of that alliance. It was COSATU which really led the liberation struggle in the 1980s, when the ANC was banned, was in exile, was in prison, and it couldn't operate legally. The progressive labor laws that we put in place since becoming a democracy in 94 is because of the COSATU was able to negotiate with the ANC to put these laws, to even put these labor rights in the constitution. Many of the victories we've won, for example, minimum wage, the right to join trade unions, the right to strike, many of the social wage interventions, free education, subsidized public transport, free healthcare, and so forth, free tertiary education, are because of COSATU being in alliance with the ANC. It doesn't mean it's a bed of roses. At times, like with any other political party, with any other employer, you will not get everything you want. When trade unions negotiate, they will ask for 10 Rand and might settle on 5 Rand as part of the negotiations process. But if we look at what trade unions have achieved outside of COSATU, most of them struggle. In fact, most of the trade unions come to COSATU and say, can you negotiate for this or for that, for this law, with government and so forth. But the EFF is free to do so. And look, we welcome competition because competition keeps us on our toes. We need our trade unions to recruit workers, to service those workers, to deliver to them. And of course, competition can be welcome in that regard. We need to take up the opportunity and rise to the challenge.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. And Demas, just before we let you go, Kenya's finance minister last month unveiled a $28 billion budget aimed at helping the economy recover after the COVID-19 pandemic through hundreds of thousands of people out of work. Are you hopeful that this would be the much-needed stimulus that will rejig the Kenyan economy and bring long-lasting succor to the people? Judging by the fact, and also taking into factor that this is a transitionary year, it's an election year, and President Uhuru Kenyatta will cease to be president after the August elections.
So unless we deal with certain underlying issues, for example, the heavy taxation, the runaway corruption, we see spectacular examples of monies meant for development, meant for coronavirus treatment, and for example, construction of dams. We've seen spectacular examples of corruption scandals that really erode any confidence in terms of earmarked monies for certain things being used for them as was planned. So unless we deal with corruption, unless we deal with the tax regime, unless we deal with how we borrow money and how we use it, it is very difficult to imagine that we'll see a turnaround in the near future. This being an election year, traditionally election years see investors shy away from putting money in the Kenyan economy because there's usually a lot of instability. And so, for example, I would urge the current government to ensure a smooth transition, to ensure that the police act in a way that respects human rights, that is professional and that is accountable, so that we do not see what we saw in 2017 in the last election cycle, where protesters were killed and beaten up, where certain areas of the country were basically closed down because of what they are perceived to support in terms of the presidential bid. So the government has a lot to do in terms of ensuring that they protect the constitution, they protect the Kenyans, so that we go through a peaceful election period, and so that investors can have the confidence to put in money and which will perhaps translate in better conditions and a better economy, which ultimately will cause laborers to reap and to have better working conditions.
Okay, finally, Matthew, we know that unions are an integral part of the ANC. What are the chances with this uproar in the May Day celebrations and so many disgruntled elements, especially at the Labour workforce? What are the chances of Ramaphosa being re-elected to head the ANC?
Well, look, I think there's two elections. So in terms of the ANC elections, I think he's safe. That's the ANC elections, the party elections in December this year. Of course, there's some who don't support him, but they don't support him because they want to start stealing again, because he's been trying to stop the corruption. So yeah, there are some idiots who will try their luck and they won't succeed. I think the real question is whether or not he and the ANC will win the next elections in 2024, in 2 years' time. That's the national and provincial elections. That one is very difficult to say. I think it's 50-50. If the ANC wins, we will win by the tiniest of margins, maybe 51% if we're lucky. But if you look at the local election results that happened in November last year, for the first time since 1994, the ANC went under 50%. We've got about, I think, 45% roughly. We lost basically all the big cities in the country, except for Durban and one or two other smaller cities. And I think if we were to have the elections tomorrow, I think the ANC would lose, to be honest. The ANC would come first because other smaller parties are so small. They themselves don't have popularity or credibility with significant amounts of people, including the EFF, which gets about 10% of the vote. But I think what you would find if the election were tomorrow, that the ANC would get in the 40%, there would be coalitions, it'll become quite messy. You might find that all the opposition parties might get together to remove the ANC, as they've done in many cities together, where the EFF, the DA, and other parties have formed coalitions together. Our hope, in which we're engaging with the ANC and the president on, is that workers are angry, so deal with the issues which are irritating workers. The unemployment rate of 46%, rampant corruption in the state, a stagnant economy. Make sure that electricity is working, make sure the trains which deliver goods and passengers are working, make sure we deliver basic services to people so the economy can grow, we can save jobs, we can create jobs. People are realistic, they're pragmatic, South Africans are very patient, but they want to see action, they want to have a sense of hope, they want to see their lives improving. If we don't do that, then yes, we must not be surprised when voters deal with us and kick the ANC out in 2 years' time, and we'll have ourselves to blame, to be honest.
Is there still time for the ANC to turn their fortune around before the next general elections in 2 years?
There is time. I'll just give you one example. The tax authority, there's the tax agency. During the Zuma era, it was at the epicenter of state capture and corruption. The looting taking place there was unbelievable. It really threw the state back. It led to the significant fiscal shortfalls in revenue collection. There's now a new competent commissioner at the tax authority who's cleaning it up, he's rebuilding it, and he's helped to generate an additional 60 billion rand in tax revenue this year. And that has enabled government to spend about 40 billion rand on social grants for unemployed people, for 10 million people, 20 billion rand on a job creation program, helping 500,000 people to find jobs. So that just shows you, if you put competent people who are committed to dealing with corruption, people who are skilled, we can rebuild the state. South Africa is fortunate to have a significant infrastructure, a very diversified, industrially modernized economy. We're not dependent upon one mining crop product like Zambia, for example, Angola. We're not dependent upon one sector of the economy. It's very diversified. But we have to get the basics right. We have to stop stealing. We have to rebuild government. We have to provide decent roads, electricity, and water, so companies can do what they need to do, and workers can have jobs, and we can have a better life for people.
Okay, right. Thank you. Now, Demas, this is an election year in Kenya. August 9th, Kenyans will go to the polls to elect a new president. We do know how elections in Kenya can be contentious. You did mention when you answered the last question about investors, foreign investors not willing to put their money down because they really can't tell. The environment is unpredictable. Now, are you confident that the elections will pass without incident in August 9th? And as Kenyans learned the lessons from previous post-election violence?
Well, I can only say that I hope for a peaceful transition and a peaceful election. But what we have seen in terms of legal and policy changes is that they have not been sufficient. The way, for example, the police operate has not really been transformed. The injustices that happened in the past, in 2007, in 2017, have not been addressed. So there is no real accountability.
The fault lines are still there. The fault lines, yes.
Can you hear me?
I said the fault lines are still there.
Yes, the fault lines are still there. The structures are still the same. The electoral body itself has not really changed so much since the Supreme Court found that they did a bad job in processing the last election. And so what we can say is that let's hope that the people holding office will stay true to their oaths and stay true to their mandates to ensure that the person that the Kenyans choose will indeed be given a chance to take Kenya through another period as per our constitution and as per democracy dictates. And that is our hope, is that the structures that are there will not be abused by anyone.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure having you join us on the conversation to discuss labour issues in your various countries, the Republic of Kenya and the Republic of South Africa. I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Matthew Parks, Parliamentary Coordinator, Congress of South African Trade Union, joining from Cape Town, South Africa, and Demas Kipromno, a policy analyst and human rights lawyer who joined in from Wales. Thank you to you both. We do appreciate your insight. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, in the second part, we'll be looking at May Day celebrations in Nigeria, the fight of the Nigerian workers and the struggle for better pay. As Nigerian workers join the rest of the world to celebrate Workers' Day on Sunday, May the 1st, many were quick to express deep concerns that the country is still struggling in its quest for good governance. Several years after independence, authors insist the 30,000 naira minimum wage, which some states are yet to implement, is insufficient to meet the value of basic foodstuff for the healthy living of an adult in a month, let alone an entire family.
Now, the organized labor through representatives highlighted the high rate of unemployment, galloping inflation in the economy, devaluation of the naira, low wages, widespread insecurity, the rising cost of living, a near comatose education sector, and a failing healthcare sector as some of the challenges facing the Nigerian worker. Joining us now live on the conversation to discuss this is Chairman Trade Union Congress Lagos State Council, Gbenga Ekundayo. Good to have you join us on the conversation at this time.
Thank you very much. It's lovely being here with you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
All right, so we're looking at May Day celebrations in Nigeria, and the governments of Taraba, Cross River, Abia, and Zamfara states have failed to commence the payment of the arrears of national minimum wage owed their workers and even clear the backlog of pension arrears owed its retirees. What do you think is responsible for this?
Well, you know, sitting here in Lagos to talk about what goes on in other states, it will be a bit difficult. It will have been easier for the labor leaders in that state to tell what goes on in their state. A lot of states have been hiding under paucity of fund, challenges in the economy, and what have you, as basis for why they don't have the capacity to pay the minimum wage. But as workers, we cannot take that. We cannot accept such a narrative because we know they have what it takes to make the payment. Even if they want to claim they don't have it, they should have led the way by showing us a reduction in government spending on government activities. If we see that, then we can know, okay, these are serious austerity measures being taken. But in a situation whereby we still keep saying, you know, the expensive governance system that we run, you have all the staff and all that, I mean, the political appointees and all that they always have around. It's difficult for us to believe that they don't have money to pay.
Now, Gbenga,
so right now, what we can say is what they're saying, what they're doing is unacceptable.
Now, Gbenga, this year's May Day theme is labor politics and the quest for good governance and development in Nigeria. And in the past, we've seen a low turnout of Nigerians in the general elections. We've seen voter apathy. What is the Nigerian Labour Congress and what's your union doing to mobilize people to come out and vote? Because we do know the importance of voting in a democracy.
Thank you for that question. The theme of this year's May Day, labor politics and the quest for good governance and development in Nigeria, is very important because of the time that we are, the period. You know, we'll be heading to the polls and there'll be a lot of activities leading to the polls. What we're doing as a labor center is that TUC has set up at the national level a political commission And that commission has been inaugurated across 3 zones in Nigeria. There was the Eastern Zone, comprising states around the South, South, and Southeast. There was the Western Zone, comprising states within the Southwestern region. Those Southwestern geopolitical zone, I beg your pardon. Those have been inaugurated, they've been set up. You remember March 28th this year, the unfortunate incident on the rail line Abuja to Kaduna that happened. Tribunal Congress of Nigeria lost 2 of our comrades in that incident to the terrible insecurity situation in the land. We lost the Secretary General, late Comrade Musa Lawal Zigi, and we also lost the Kwara State Chairman, Comrade Akinwumi Akinshola. They were actually going from Abuja to Kaduna to inaugurate the Northern Commission of the Political Commission of TUC. So what we're doing as a labor center is to use that political commission to set an agenda of what would drive the yearning and the aspirations of Nigerians, what will make governance deliver the dividends of democracy to Nigerians, to workers in particular. And we intend to galvanize, conscientize, and mobilize workers. We are done with the days of sitting back and waiting for things to happen, only for us to be complaining about policies that are being formulated and implemented. We believe if we get involved in the process of electing officers, we can have people with the right mindset to formulate and implement policies that will impact positively in the lives of Nigerians. So that's what we're doing right now. And in a few weeks, months from now, we shall be seeing us going from central district to central district, raising awareness of Nigerians across Nigeria to be part of the process. So this is what we're doing.
All right, Gbenga, aside from insecurity, I know that another thing that has affected a lot of Nigerians and people are talking about is inflation. And when you look at the minimum wage, 30,000 naira, according to a report by Bikodi, that's an international e-commerce company published on Friday, he said the value of basic food products for the healthy living of an adult in a month at the beginning of 2022 stood at 40,000 naira, 980, higher than the 30,000 naira minimum wage in Nigeria. Now, there have been several calls for an increase, a further increase in minimum wage. What are your thoughts on this?
See, it's in 2 parts. There is the income that we earn. And like you said, we've all seen what happened recently. Just 2019, we had a minimum wage review, which even some governors have not even complied with, like you mentioned just now. Even that, between 2019 and now, there's been terrible devaluation of the naira. There has been galloping inflation, increase in the prices of products in the market. That has totally eroded the gains of 2019. So definitely, it is proper for us to be calling at this time for an increase even in that minimum wage, because what we got in 2019 cannot take anybody home. It is not really a take-home that you can refer to as a take-home right now. So that's the challenge with that. So we'll definitely be calling for an increase, even though the minimum wage is supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. So we'll be talking about that. The second part is the fact that we need to be to produce more. We need to have more products within the country. We need to be less dependent on importation. We need to produce what we use. And that's the drive that we need to put our eyes on and push the government to create an enabling environment for Nigerians to create jobs, create employment, create opportunities en masse. And one key thing to doing this is availability of 24 hours supply of electricity. If we have electricity in abundance, Nigerians will do magic. That is very important. And also, we need to have a situation whereby Nigerians don't need to struggle or think about their next meal. If Nigerians can feed properly, minds can unlock, great things can happen. And we continue to engage. Like in Lagos, we continue to engage the government and we continue to participate in activities. Like they're talking about wealth creation in Lagos State, talking about different panels, different discussions, looking at formalizing the informal sector, looking at standardizing and revamping, the way things are done for the artisans to make them, to give them access to better life, to provisions of insurance and things like that. We're getting involved in that so that more and more people can help themselves, more and more people can even produce more things that can be products available. You see, it is free market. The more products you have at good production rate, the less we'll have to pay for those items. So those are the things that, we are working on, challenging ourselves, challenging the government, challenging the status quo to see how things can improve generally. So besides calling for increase in wages, we are also looking at the market that we will take the money to. What happens there? What are the things that come to the market? At what price do they come to the market? So those are the things that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gbenga Ekundayo. You've spoken quite well. And we're also excited about the programs that the Trade Union Congress, Lagos Council, has to galvanize the people in order to participate in the 2023 general elections and other issues we've talked about. Thank you very much for your time and insights on the subject.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening.
Okay, this is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of The Conversation. In the first half of the show, we spoke about Labour Day celebrations in the Republic of South Africa and Kenya. We just concluded our conversation with Mr. Gbenga Ekundayo, the chairman of the Lagos State Trade Union Congress Council. Thanks for watching The Conversation. We'll join you same time on Wednesday for another edition of The Conversation. I'm Gbenga Aborowa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. Bye-bye.